Good morning. Sorry for the delay. Welcome aboard Pride of Baltimore 2 and Coffee with Captain Jan Miles. That's me. So we have a cool morning in Baltimore this morning. It's been freeze warnings this morning in the middle of April. So sort of unique. I understand it's pretty freezy to the north, of course, as you go north. So what's our first question, Jeff? Oh, and behind the camera is Jeff Crosby, Chief Mate.
Hello, everyone. So our first question is a question from Jay. Jay would like to hear about our guest crew possibilities in the future, and what are our guest crew possibilities? What's our guest crew program?
So when we move Pride on an itinerary for her mission, it's port to port throughout the season, well established, long in advance, with goals to be met in port. So the vessel's basically being delivered from one port to the next port in as an efficient way as feasible, with one proviso, and that is we're looking to sail the vessel. She has engines, so we could really put in a higher average speed, but because we want to sail the vessel, we have modeled an average speed that enables us to promise a date in a town in the future, while also being able to allow for some sailing time. So we have 6 extra spaces on board that permit for people who want to join the crew to come work the ship as if they were crew, hence the phrase guest crew. So when you're coming aboard, there's no program, there's no service of passenger ship service type. There is literally getting engaged with the rest of the crew. So there's a safety program. You need to know the equipment. You get introduced to that. You get into the business of the hour-to-hour cycle while the vessel's en route. And being en route, it could be non-stop. It could be with stops. It's all about the captains getting the logistical answer to making sure the vessel arrives on time. Like I said, that's in the calendar and been in the calendar for a while in any given season. So the next opportunity, that's a big question. Under the current emergency, global emergency, we don't have a knowledge as to when the next opportunity could occur. So stick with our website. Keep an eye on our postings on our website at Pride of Baltimore, and you get a chance to imagine, once those are posted, those chances are posted, you can imagine your opportunity to come aboard.
And our website is pride2.org. Was a guest crew opportunity available on the first boat, or is that something that's singular to the second Pride?
It's singular to the second Pride. The first vessel was never certified under Coast Guard. It was a pure effort at being a replica that would sit still.
Sure.
Then it grew into this traveling ambassador and was very successful at changing hearts and minds. The original idea was to change hearts and minds of Baltimore citizens with regards to their town when it was originally conceived. When it grew into a sailing ambassador, it proved to be even more effective at changing hearts and minds on a broader scale, not just Maryland and Baltimore citizens, but also across the country. And that moved internationally. As a unlicensed vessel, she was built according to the replica sense of that effort. The second vessel, when it became decided to build, it was clearly going to follow as much, for sure, Coast Guard regulations for passenger carrying as a way of enhancing revenue. Now, there's no way the project could ever pay for itself with passengers.
Yeah.
But it could enhance the ability to raise money through its own the use of the vessel directly. So that was going to be a Coast Guard reason, along with the fact, with the feeling that we could do a pretty good job of being reproductive of the Baltimore Clipper at the same time. So we have Pride of Baltimore 2 as a certified vessel. Now the guest crew program is under the uninspected vessel license program.
Okay.
So our requirements in that situation are to maintain safety gear as per carrying more than 6, maintain crew as per more than 6, when it comes to day sails, or in the case of overnight, all those things. Even though we're 6 or less, we maintain those parameters, and so she ventures outside of her more than 6 zones, such as day sail zones, when she's making a transit. But then when she comes into those zones, so less than 20 miles safe harbor refuge, or in lakes, bays, rivers, and sounds, so it's a very workable process for her to generate some side money in the process of the overall effort to keep the mission going.
Also, it creates an opportunity for a really cool experience, both on the day sail front and as a guest crew. This question is coming in from Greg Bauer. What is the maximum speed of Pride 2 given ideal conditions? Is it limited to hull design? And how fast have you seen Pride 2 achieve?
Hello, Greg. Yeah, it's a common, not a common question, but we get this question now and again. The waterline length is 91. The formula for hull speed of displacement vessels is the square root times a factor 1.34, which is derived out of the phenomenon of wave motion in the water. And so that comes out to 12.78 knots as a hull speed. It's been through experience of recognition that different hull forms of the same waterline length can make for different ultimate factors. In our case, my experience, I've seen the vessel momentarily, at least 20 seconds, maybe 30 seconds, reach 15 knots when we were in an Atlantic crossing in 1996, and we had a weather pattern that was strong and fresh. We were running before it on a broad reach, and it was building towards sunset, and the helmsman noted with a call and a shout that he'd seen 15 knots on the knot meter. I immediately looked at our GPS down below, and we had 2 at the time. One was measured out at averaging 1 minute average, the other was instant readout, and I watched the instant readout match 15 knots, and then a minute later I saw the averaging one for 1 minute reach 15 knots. Now, we do not sail constantly at 15 knots.
That'd be cool, right?
A 24-hour run of 249 miles, 257 miles, in 24 hours has been reached 3 to 4 or 5 times, as I recall. And the very, very fastest was a 15-hour run at 11.5 knots for average. So it's she can power up. She's a very powerful vessel. She can stand to her sail plan, particularly when you're broad reaching. She seems to go faster occasionally than her calculated hull speed, but not that often. Seeing 10 knots, 9-10 knots is relatively frequent. Seeing 11, it starts to fall off.
What are some characteristics about Pride, her hull shape, her rig design, that influence her speed, especially during different conditions?
Well, the sail area to the hull is where she gets her power. The type of sail area she has, I don't think has anything to do with her speed. It becomes sort of an abstract conversation. Why is she so fast when she's so old styled? Well, it's just a lot of sail area. It's unique sail area to the overall fleet as exists today. In the United States, our schooner fleet doesn't carry a lot of the kinds of sails we carry. There are a few. I mean, the Amistad and the Lynx has a square topsail. There are other attributes that are out there that are somewhat parallel. So what makes her fast and powerful is the sail area. And then there is the use of that sail area because of the unique types of sails, understanding where the real drive is. We were doing a study over the last years with a naval architect about predicting heel angle for sail area for wind speed, and he noted after a while that the energy that's packed in the square topsail at 1,100 square feet of area is equal to the mainsail, which is 1,700 plus square feet. So the difference of altitude has a lot to do with it. No, the Pride is well designed, and she's well suited to her sail plan, and we know where the balance is, so we work with that, and and because her stability is as good as it is, we can, when you have a broad wind angle, you can stand up a lot to wind that you can't. For instance, we can sail at half the speed of the true wind up to our hull speed. So when we're seeing true wind of 25, we're very, very close to 11 and 12 when we're carrying enough sail.
Yeah.
Now, sometimes you just don't want to carry that much sail, so you don't actually achieve that. But when you're at 16, 18 knots, and you're close reaching, beam reaching, broad reaching, you can expect the vessel to be able to do half or better of the true wind speed.
Just kind of to continue this a little bit further, can you explain kind of differences, say we're sailing in the Chesapeake Bay with 20 knots of breeze versus sailing in the middle of the Atlantic with 20 knots of breeze. What are the differences going to be in sail plan and approach?
Well, it's also about wind angle. So if we're seeing 20 knots and we want to go against it, we have a lot less sail area up, and in the Chesapeake Bay, it's a lot of work, but it's doable. The sea state just doesn't get that big. In the case of going out in the open waters, we would not even probably try to go to windward in a steady state of 20 knots. The sea would be 6-8 feet, and we're not doing that. Now, when it comes to reaching and broad reaching, so reaching is the area of apparent wind is still forward of the beam, but not a lot. And then broad reaching is when it's as far after the beam as feasible without shadowing the sails ahead of the main. Then you get a situation where it almost 20 knots is a great ride. Yeah. Because the sea state's not that big in the ocean. In the bay, of course, it's an even stunning ride, because if you set a lot of sail and you're beam reaching, in 20 knots, you're doing 10, 11 knots. In the case of the ocean, now you get into a situation where you're running 24 hours, and do you really want to have that much power up after dark?
Yeah. What's
the change of the weather situation? Now, we have sailed with a great deal of sail area through the night. Trade winds are great for that. We've sailed with a double reef main, no gaff topsail, and still had the stunsail up.
Oh, wow.
Because the effort of the sail plan is so concentrated, not the effort, but the overall spread of the sail plan, when you're broad reaching, means the wind's hitting the main first. So that's giving you your weather helm, along with other factors that create the weather helm. Angle of heel helps with that. So to reduce the weather helm, we have found that we don't lose a lot of speed when we dump the main gaff topsail, get rid of that. That reduces the weather helm and the leverage. And then as it built, we're dealing with trade winds of 22, 25 knots, true. We're doing 10 knots through the water, so the apparent wind is like 18.
Oh, wow.
And we can reduce the weather helm and the angle, a maximum angle heel, even though we're broad reaching, by reducing the main even further. But you are pulling the boat when you keep the sail area forward.
Yeah.
So that's what's going on there. So we can still do 10 knots, 9 knots, 10 knots, hour after hour, day after day in a trade. That's fairly fresh when we reduce the after portion of the sail plan.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting. Good morning, everyone. If you're just tuning in, this is our third Coffee with Captain. Chief Mate Jeff Crosby behind the camera here, and Captain Jan Miles in front of the camera. This question, I think, is from Patrick. Captain Miles, can you tell us about your mug? Is that the famed Ugly Muggly?
Well, I have a tendency to game words. And I've had several mugs.
Sure.
And I've always referred to them in a nickname way of my Ugly Muggly. So This has been around a long time. So yes, this is the current and has been. I don't know, could be 10 years now.
Is this one of your longest lasting mugs?
Yes, no question about it. And so it's perfect for stability. As an example, for a mug or water of anything, tea, water, coffee. I watch the crews using different normal mugs, and they go catapulting all over the deck sometimes. But this one doesn't do it.
Yeah, it's
as
got
often.
the good wide base.
Yeah.
This is a question just in from Tom Nank. Hi, Captain Miles. Did anything ever come of the idea to put the Maryland state flag crest on the topsail?
Not yet. In the case of the old Pride of Baltimore, they did the city crest on the Tgallant. We've had an ongoing conversation about emblems. There's a fundraising conversation associated with that idea of putting a symbol on the sail. It's a subjectively loaded conversation, and no, there's been no resolution. Conceivably, we could put the Maryland colors on the top gallant, and not necessarily always fly have it on the square topsail. I think that the beauty of the boat is part of the question, and should we do it? The answer is why not? But that's also raising the question of why do it at all? Look at the beauty of the boat, and so it won't hurt the boat to do it. It's all about what's the impression we want to leave, and how do we want to leave it, and where does the real handover? We carry the flag at the top of the fore topmast.
Yeah.
And so it's not that we're not carrying Maryland colors. We sail the Maryland colors everywhere. It's our sailing flag when we're doing voyaging, our wind flag, wind direction, apparent wind direction flag. We use the state flag all the time. So it's not that there's any time when the state is never represented.
Right.
It's always represented. And so when we go to sea, a lot of the other flags don't get flown. It's a wear and tear cost factor. We don't even fly the ensign when we're doing long distance voyaging. It's just very expensive. And if you get into a sail reduction need, it's a big headache.
In the way.
Yeah, it's in the way. So once we get into the public view side of things, then of course we're carrying everything.
So this next question is coming in from a Rodney Burley. What has been your favorite place to sail the Pride to? And I'm going to modify that question just a little bit with the old boat and the new boat. So favorite place to sail the old boat to, and favorite place that the new boat has been sailed to.
Well, I think the hands down one place it's favorite to sail to is Baltimore, Ireland. The first time we went was absolutely, totally unexpected, wonderful relationship building experience for everybody on both sides of that equation.
And was that with the first boat?
Yeah, that was with the first boat. We were in the Atlantic crossing. We were scheduled to go to Cork. Cork was celebrating 800 years in 1985.
Oh, wow.
And it was a big all year round celebration, and we were going to spend some time in Cork City. On the way, you're passing very close to Fastnet Rock, which is where Baltimore Harbor is, and the little fishing village of Baltimore, Ireland, and they have a very active recreational and fishing waterborne activity. So a yacht club there sent over their Commodore and said, please stop in Baltimore. We'd like to host you. And of course, I'm the captain. I got to get to Cork. I don't want to take time to go out of my way, not being fully conversant where Baltimore was. But once I studied the situation, okay, look, if we run ahead of schedule, we'll stop in. Well, we were running so far ahead of schedule, we wound up spending 10 days in Baltimore, Ireland, and it was a absolutely amazing experience on both sides. And as a result, we've made great effort to return. So in the case of the second Pride, the first time across, we went directly to Baltimore, Ireland. Over the years since, that would have been 1990, years following, we have actually created an itinerary at some point in the year, either at the first of the season or the last of the season in Europe before coming home. We've always passed through Baltimore, Ireland. It's a great place to come and visit. So to go to, it's all about Baltimore. I mean, the trip could be pretty awful sometimes, but
Sure.
but you're going to Baltimore.
That's a pretty hefty voyage with a lot of sea to go through.
Yeah. So in terms of sailing, though, I think our general home range of East Coast, particularly north of Hatteras, in the bay, is a little tight, but because of the Northeast going through and around the New England area, it's familiar to us. It's homegrown in a sense. That's where our crew come from in the sense of the whole union coming. It's just so popular. The schooner fleet in Maine means there's a real hotbed of interest, concentration there. Nova Scotia would be, or Lunenburg particularly, would be a great place to go to and sail around with them there in that local area. But I would say that generally the most enjoyable sailing, we're in the lee of the continent. The wind's coming from the west.
Right.
And when it's coming from the east, we just don't sail.
That's true. That's true. This next question. Good morning for those of you that are just joining us. This is our third Coffee with Captain. We have Captain Jan Miles in front of the camera, Chief Mate Jeff Crosby behind the camera. This next question is coming from Tom Price. Good morning, Tom. Were 1812 schooners faster than the Pride? Drawings of them make them seem more extreme.
Yeah, well, that's a pretty speculative topic. My instinct says no. They're not faster than this version of a Baltimore Clipper being Pride of Baltimore 2. The essential difference is strength of holding up the lighter spars. If you think in terms of the 1812 war, everything was rope, and the ironwork was very, very rudimentary. There was no screw thread fasteners. Everything would be a pin, a lot of rope stropping, as we have continue here with the Pride of Baltimore. So everything was rope, and we're able to carry the jib. To give you an idea, with the jib boom, so the extra spar out the front beyond the bowsprit, we're able to carry the jib in 25 knots of apparent wind and upwards of 30 of apparent wind. I can't believe for an instant that the jib boom could be sustained with a jib back in the day, just because of the strength of material, the way it's fastened into the hull, the way the rigging is loaded up. Being able to pre-anticipate the stretch would be very, very tricky for those kinds of loads. Now, maybe in apparent winds of 15 to 18 knots they could carry it, but the 25, we have an advantage of higher freeboard, which allows us to carry more sail area because we can sustain a greater amount of heel angle without putting a lot of water on deck. The old Pride of Baltimore was, for her size being smaller, she would have had a lower freeboard anyway. But she did not have the extra freeboard that this, as a Coast Guard certified vessel, has as a little bit more freeboard than would have been the period. So when she started to heel, you had to start reducing power because you weren't going to carry that water on deck. The idea of carrying a lot of water on deck on any vessel is just ridiculous. So her deck edge wet angle of heel was probably in the area of 15 degrees. Ours is 21. So there's a significant difference in the context of what's acceptable. So I would say that if Pride of Baltimore 2 were to suddenly go through a time warp and be able to sail back then, she would outsail everybody.
Sure.
She wouldn't have the armament that they had.
Yeah, especially with these new cannons. Yeah.
So I think that there is a misrepresentation of the authenticity. If you get into the weeds on the idea of the authenticity, Pride of Baltimore 2 is a bit misrepresentative, but it's towards the positive and the thrilling side of it, and
Sure.
the astonishing side of it. Right.
Do you think that manpower and knowledge might have played a factor? You know, people, generally speaking, knew a lot more about sailing, especially sailing traditionally rigged vessels, and these privateers were running completely overmanned. Do you think that would have made a difference in performance, ability to address issues quicker, sail the boat, tack the boat quicker?
Well, yeah, you talk about the manpower. There's a lot of weight in those boats. So if you were to go boat for boat, size for size, with Pride of Baltimore 2, probably would be a lighter boat.
Sure.
For all kinds of different reasons.
Yeah.
So there's that. The business of what they knew. See, that's a bit of a mystery for me, and not being a historian, I have not heard anyone talk about the business of how sails draft back then, their knowledge of that,
Sure.
versus my knowledge of it today. So, for instance, the ringtail sail is an example of not understanding what drafting meant.
Yeah.
The ringtail works if you stall the mainsail. That means the wind's going around both the luff and the leach. Whereas we today know that you need to have cross flow to get the best out of it, which means you don't go directly downwind, you reach. But there are accounts of running before a fleet of naval vessels chasing you down in very, very light air, very, very light air. And it was downwind was considered the fastest, and dead downwind was, and with everything up. There's artwork that, in fact, Tom provided to us in a slideshow lecture that I used not long ago. And there's an art period of the time, and it just shows so much sail area, and it's all going dead downwind.
Yeah.
However, with a fore and aft plan, mostly being a schooner with squares attached, if they had reached, they could sail with less sail area and go faster for the conditions. So I would say that that is essentially where we're different today. We're always trying, except for short runs, dead downwind. We're always using we're trying to use all the sails. So that means we're reaching all the time.
Sure. A lot of it is speculation. We just don't really know. That's fair. This question is coming in from Greg Bauer. What does your non-typical day look like for Pride Crew given current circumstances?
Oh, well, of the northeast coast tall ships or traditional sailing vessels, we're one of the earlier ones to have started rig up. We started a crew up in mid-February, and we were rigged up by mid-March because we were getting ready to take the boat down to Annapolis to participate in recognizing Maryland Day and to thank the General Assembly for a grant that they gave to the company to operate the boat. The crisis came in and stopped us after 2 shakedown sails of the crew, and all things have been canceled. And today we have been now a little more than 2 weeks in the governor's stay-at-home order, working on the boat, maintaining the boat, waiting for the opportunity to go sailing. She's ready to sail. So the question is will we sail? So that's an ongoing question. So 6 days a week, it's take care of the boat. There's a certain amount of advantage to that situation in that we're able to concentrate some of the maintenance that we would normally do spread out between events in a normal year. We're able to concentrate on just doing that rather than pick time between public events. So that's sort of unique. And yes, everybody's going a little stir crazy. But we have the advantage of more space around the ship to spread out on, as we have a bit of a compound. It's a parking lot, so it's not grass, and we have shore facilities, so we can keep the hygiene high by using the shore facilities and keeping the ship clean. So right now we're in the same limbo that everybody is, but we have the opportunity of being able to maintain the boat because it got rigged up and we have the crew. Other vessels did not rig up. They were going to, and then with the crisis, the timing was such they have not. So they're sort of standing somewhat minimally we have the big question is what's going to happen for the rest of the year, and we don't know if it could turn into go back to being laid up, which means down rigging and covering and going to just plain no one on board.
Mode.
Yeah, standby mode.
But the work lists are not close to their end yet. We have plenty of work to do, plenty to keep us busy.
I think we got until the end of this month.
Yeah, which means a heck of a lot of sanding at least. This next question is coming in from Robert Wheeler. Robert asks, what is your stance on the 2.6 controversy? Well, first of all, what is the 2.6 controversy?
Right, okay, the 2.6 controversy. It's attached to the crew of a gun, whereby in a big gun you muzzle load, so therefore you got to pull the gun away from the side of the ship to gain access to the muzzle, so that you can reload or load anyway, and then reload after a fire. And so you have a gang to a gun, and the story goes that there's this chant, 2-6, based on where the team is spread around a cannon. Well, I'm not a historian, so I just hear what I hear, and I say, so we'll use that when it comes to pulling on a line on prod, and you got a lot of people, and you want to do a vigorous timing, get everybody together to haul a line. And then it comes out, by those who know more about this than I do, that there's no such thing as this 2-6 for the cannon team. So I say, okay, fine. We still need to chant. So what shall we chant? So schooners are a fast set sail. Shanties come from very, very large sailing rig vessels with a slow, with a small crew, relatively small crew for their size of ship. Everything is slower. Mm-hmm. Everything is, you don't want to exhaust the crew. You got a lot of sail to set. Each one, you got to raise a yard. It's a heavy yard. So the timing thing goes to more of a rhythm for endurance rather than quickness. In a schooner, we're looking for quick, particularly in a modern day with a schooner, even a traditional schooner. So I said, I don't care what the chant is, just not 2-6.
And we oftentimes get a lot of boat-specific or Baltimore-specific chants going. Natty Bow being one of those. This next question coming in. Can you explain what situations navigating in very clustered waters, for example, when the boat was voyaging to China, were like in relation to standing order?
Well, there's a merchant marine or commercial marine standing guideline to watch officers, and one of them, there's a whole list of them, to notify the captain. In one of them is this business of closest point of approach of traffic. Mm-hmm. So with today's radar, when there's a chance that a vessel will break through in this arbitrary range of 2 miles, some vessels might use a greater range or a smaller range. Typically, the Americans use 2 miles. Then the captain's got to be notified. In the East China Sea, with all those Chinese fishing vessels, especially in a dense fog, there's no maintaining a 2 mile closest point of approach. It's just not feasible. So we had to adjust the standing orders, almost watch by watch, and I was napping rather than sleeping because I'd get called. And we got down to the point where don't call me if it's going to, until it's actually going to pierce a half a mile CPA.
Sure.
Watch the trend and call me if you're pretty certain ahead of that, but half a mile, based on the speeds we were doing at the time, we were doing 6 knots. They were doing fishing. They don't go that fast, the fishing vessels. And it's been interesting when we were out there in 1998 to hear cargo vessels dealing with these fleets in the fog. They want to maintain their 12, 15, 18, 20 knots. And they just hang on the horn. They just hang on the horn. Get out of the way, get out of the way. And they cannot maintain a 2-mile CPA. So, yeah, it's we had to make an adjustment. The mates, that meant they had to understand even more tightly the business of a contact and how to track a contact on radar. Mm-hmm. This is before AIS, before you had the graphics on chart.
Very easy.
Yeah. So,
we have another question in from Robert Wheeler. Given the current situation, what is the best hull shape for being tied to the dock?
Ha! Robert. I don't know that there is a best hull shape. I mean, I haven't even thought that question through. I would say that it's nice to have a protected area for a vessel.
Yeah.
No matter what the hull shape is. I mean, in our case, we have some disadvantage and advantage with what the channels provide for protecting the planking of the hull. So we take full advantage of our channels. Now, what are channels? Well, channels are these structures that stand out past the side of the vessel. So we have a beam of 29 feet. We have between a foot and a half of these wings that stick out. The chain plates come up to the outer edges of the wings, and that creates a wider base for the shrouds. So that's a period of time representation. Well, what do you do when you come alongside a wall? Well, we put fenders outside of the channels, and so this compression direction is actually some of the strongest we have for protecting the vessel, because if the vessel's going sideways, it's coming into the wall, landing on the channels, which is right on the edge of the frames, which is right on the edge of the deck beams. So you've got a great deal of resistance there.
Yeah.
Up and down, that's a real problem. Channels that are against the wall or pilings or whatever, and there's a sea state, that's no good. So you have to not be in that situation. So I would say mostly it's get into a protection. It doesn't matter what the hull shape is. Get into a protection so you're not having a situation where the hull is slamming against anything.
Yeah.
Is not chafing frequently in a seaway. So you need protection from the swell.
Yeah, I would go with hull material. You know, if hull built out of steel, it's going to be a lot better than these old wood boats. And last question for this Coffee with Captain. What is your favorite international tall ship? And what do you like about said ship?
I think the Dutch, back in 2000, when they produced, big introduction, big celebration, their new clipper ship, the Stad Amsterdam. That is very, very, very handsomely done, and is very, very faithful to the concept of the American creation, the clipper ship. Now, there's a lot of discussion among historians about the origin of the clipper ship. There's no question they were built in New York and Boston, but there is a great deal of feeling that the concept of their construction, or rather their design, not construction, their design, is a derivative of what came out of Baltimore in terms of fast schooners. Over the 1700s, going into the early 1800s, it became clear that speed and maneuverability was a defense and was an advantage. Baltimore was one of the fastest growing cities in the United States, of the three big cities in the United States, during the early 1700s. And there's some reason to believe that part of that credit goes to these small schooners in terms of cargo carrying, to the fact that they were very maneuverable, very quick, and very able to run away from anybody who was a threat. And so Baltimore grew and grew and grew for a lot of reasons. That was one of them. In the 1812 war, when these fast schooners were used as privateers, it just amplified this business of what is speed and what is delivered to you. And it's a great deal of security, a great deal of opportunity when you are able to achieve it versus any other vessel that you might come up against. So in the case of clipper ships after the 1812 war, it was big cargo, bigger vessels. And then where's the profit? Well, it started to become that profit was about getting there quicker. So high value cargo, if it was moved very, very quickly, meant you got there first. So there's a market factor. And so there's business of regular service came in. So hull form was what created speed, along with the rig and the ability to hold the rig up as metal was being machined. That was new. Wire, I understand, wasn't extruded until on the European continent until 1840. So the business of common stock thread and bolting was relatively new. But after that machining came around, you could hold up a square rigger, even with rope rigging, through bolts and bottle screws and other stuff. You could hold the ship itself together much better with planking, and so you could sustain a great deal of power if you had a hull form that could take advantage of it for going for speed. So the Stad Amsterdam is a pure clipper ship, and today she's fantastic. She's been duplicated, rather similar designs, basically the same design has been adopted by a number of other countries in sail training, military training. Stad is a passenger ship and representative yacht of a company, global company. So anyway, she's really a sharp-winded vessel. She can go to windward. She's handsome. She's very fast. So I would say that Stad Amsterdam.
Absolutely. Great. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us this morning, and thank you for those that have donated during this Coffee with Captain time. We were able to purchase a mic for this because of those donations, so hopefully the audio has been a little bit better than it has been. For those questions that we didn't get to this time around, we will answer them next Friday on our 4th installment of Coffee with Captain. And do you have any closing remarks?
Well, again, be diligent. This pandemic is all about being careful. So carry on. You're doing a great job.
All right. Bye, everyone.